Sarah Martinez had always been small for her age. At 22, she stood barely 5 feet 3 inches tall and weighed just 115 pounds. Her dark hair was pulled back in a regulation ponytail, and her brown eyes held a determination that most people missed at first glance. Today was her first day at the Metropolitan Police Academy, and she could feel every pair of eyes in the room sizing her up. The training facility buzzed with nervous energy as 43 recruits gathered for their initial orientation. Most of them were men, tall and broad-shouldered, looking like they had stepped out of action movies. Sarah found herself standing next to Mike Thompson, a former college football player who towered over her at 6 feet 4 inches. He glanced down at her with a friendly smile. "First day nerves?" Mike asked, adjusting his academy-issued gray t-shirt. Sarah nodded, wiping her sweaty palms on her matching gray shorts. "A little. You?" "Same here. I'm Mike, by the way." "Sarah." Their conversation was cut short when the heavy doors of the front of the gymnasium slammed open. In walked Sergeant Kevin Rodriguez, and the room fell silent instantly. Rodriguez was a legend at the academy. For 15 years, he had been breaking down recruits and building them back up into police officers. His reputation preceded him like a thundercloud. Rodriguez stood 6 feet tall, with the kind of muscled build that came from years of military service before joining the police force. His black hair was cut short in a military style, and his dark eyes seemed to scan each recruit like he was reading their life story. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone who had seen everything and survived to tell about it. "Welcome to hell," Rodriguez announced, his voice echoing off the gymnasium walls. "For the next 6 months, your life belongs to me. Some of you think you're tough. Some of you think you're smart. Some of you think you're ready to be cops." He paused, letting his gaze sweep across the group. "You're all wrong." Sarah felt her stomach tighten, but she kept her chin up and her eyes focused on Rodriguez. She had worked too hard to get here to let intimidation tactics break her down on day one. "Physical training is not optional," Rodriguez continued, pacing in front of the group like a caged animal. "It's not something you do when you feel like it. It's the difference between going home to your family and going home in a body bag. If you can't handle what we throw at you here, you have no business wearing a badge." He stopped directly in front of Sarah, close enough that she could smell his aftershave and see the small scar above his left eyebrow. His eyes bored into hers for what felt like an eternity. "What's your name, recruit?" he asked, his voice low and menacing. "Sarah Martinez, sir. Sarah Martinez." He repeated her name slowly, as if he was tasting it. "You look like you should be serving coffee at a diner, not chasing down criminals. What makes you think you can cut it as a cop?" Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks, but she kept her voice steady. "I want to help people, sir. I want to make a difference in my community." Rodriguez laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Help people? Make a difference." He turned to address the entire group. "She wants to help people. Did you all hear that? This little girl thinks being a cop is about holding hands and singing songs." Several recruits shifted uncomfortably, but nobody spoke. Sarah felt humiliated, but she refused to look away from Rodriguez's stare. "Being a cop is about survival," Rodriguez said, turning back to Sarah. "It's about using whatever force is necessary to go home alive at the end of your shift. It's about making split-second decisions that could save lives or end them. Can you handle that responsibility, Martinez?" "Yes, sir. We'll see about that." The first week of training was brutal. Every morning at 5:30, the recruits gathered in the gymnasium for physical training. They ran laps around the track until their lungs burned, did push-ups until their arms shook, and performed sit-ups until their stomachs cramped. Rodriguez pushed them relentlessly, constantly shouting corrections and criticisms. Sarah struggled more than most. Her smaller frame made many of the exercises more difficult, and Rodriguez seemed to take particular pleasure in pointing out her weaknesses. During obstacle course runs, she was always among the last to finish. When they practiced defensive tactics, she was repeatedly thrown to the mat by larger opponents. "Martinez, you're holding everyone back," Rodriguez bellowed during a particularly difficult training session. Maybe you should consider a career in retail instead of law enforcement. Despite the constant criticism, Sarah refused to quit. She arrived early every morning to practice on her own, and she stayed late to work on her weaknesses. Her fellow recruits began to notice her determination. Mike Thompson started offering her tips on proper running form, and several others began including her in their study groups for the academic portions of training. "Don't let Rodriguez get to you," advised Janet Wilson, a former military police officer who had become Sarah's closest friend in the program. "He's trying to see if you'll break under pressure. The streets are full of people who will try to intimidate you. He wants to know if you can handle it." Sarah appreciated the support, but the constant barrage of criticism was wearing her down. Every night, she went home to her small apartment exhausted and demoralized. She began to question whether she really belonged at the academy. Maybe Rodriguez was right. Maybe she was too small, too weak, too naive to be a police officer. The doubt reached its peak during the third week of training. The recruits were learning defensive tactics, and Rodriguez had paired them up for sparring exercises. Sarah found herself facing off against Derek Collins, a former bouncer who outweighed her by 80 pounds. "This should be interesting," Rodriguez commented with a smirk as he watched them square off on the practice mats. "Let's see if Martinez can handle herself against a real opponent." Derek looked uncomfortable with the matchup, but Rodriguez insisted they continue. The exercise began, and Derek moved slowly, clearly trying not to hurt Sarah. Rodriguez wasn't having it. "Collins, what are you doing?" Rodriguez shouted. "This isn't ballroom dancing. A real criminal isn't going to go easy on you because you're small, Martinez. Collins, treat her like any other opponent." Derek reluctantly increased his intensity, and within seconds, Sarah found herself on the ground with Derek's considerable weight pinning her down. She struggled to escape, but Derek's size advantage was overwhelming. "Pathetic," Rodriguez said, shaking his head. "Martinez, a 12-year-old, could break out of that hold. What's your excuse?" Sarah felt tears of frustration threatening to spill over, but she blinked them back and got to her feet. They repeated the exercise several more times, and each time, Sarah ended up on the mat. The other recruits watched in uncomfortable silence as Rodriguez continued his commentary. "This is exactly what I'm talking about," Rodriguez said to the group. "Some people just aren't cut out for this job. It's not personal, it's reality. Martinez, maybe it's time to seriously consider whether you belong here." That night, Sarah sat in her apartment staring at her academy handbook. She had dreamed of being a police officer since she was a child, inspired by her uncle who had died in the line of duty when she was 10. She wanted to honor his memory and continue his legacy of service. But maybe Rodriguez was right. Maybe some dreams were just too big for some people. Her phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. It was her mother. "How's the academy going, Mija?" her mother asked in Spanish. Sarah switched to English, not wanting to worry her mother with the details of her struggles. "It's challenging, Mom. Really challenging. I know it's hard, but you've always been a fighter. Remember when you were 8 years old and you wanted to play Little League baseball with the boys? Everyone said you were too small, but you kept practicing until you made the team." Sarah smiled at the memory. She had been the only girl on the team and one of the smallest players, but she had ended up being one of their best hitters because she had worked harder than anyone else. "The academy is different, Mom. These are grown men, and they're all bigger and stronger than me. Size isn't everything, Mija. Your uncle wasn't the biggest cop on the force, but he was one of the best because he was smart and determined. You have those same qualities." After hanging up with her mother, Sarah felt a renewed sense of purpose. She wasn't going to let Rodriguez or anyone else define her limits. She began researching different fighting techniques that were designed for smaller people to use against larger opponents. She watched videos online and practiced the moves in her living room. The next morning, she arrived at the academy even earlier than usual. She found the gymnasium empty and began working on the techniques she had studied. She practiced the moves over and over, focusing on using leverage and momentum instead of relying on brute strength. "What are you doing here so early, Martinez?" Sarah spun around to find Rodriguez standing in the doorway, watching her with an unreadable expression. "Training, sir," she said simply. Rodriguez walked closer, observing her form as she demonstrated a throw technique. Where did you learn that? I've been studying different martial arts techniques designed for smaller fighters, sir. Rodriguez nodded slowly. Show me what else you've learned. For the next hour, Sarah demonstrated various techniques she had been practicing. Rodriguez watched silently, occasionally offering corrections or suggestions. When they finished, he looked at her with something that might have been respect. You might have potential after all, Martinez, he said. But potential means nothing if you can't apply it under pressure. We'll see how you do in real training situations. Sarah felt a glimmer of hope for the first time in weeks. She knew Rodriguez wasn't going to go easy on her, but at least he seemed willing to give her a chance to prove herself. The following weeks brought new challenges and new opportunities for Sarah to demonstrate what she had learned. During defensive tactics training, she began to hold her own against larger opponents by using technique and strategy instead of trying to match their strength. Her confidence grew with each small victory. Rodriguez continued to push her harder than the other recruits, but Sarah began to see it differently. Instead of feeling picked on, she realized he was preparing her for the realities of police work, where she would often be at a physical disadvantage. Every criticism became a lesson, every challenge an opportunity to improve. Her fellow recruits noticed the change in her performance and began to look at her with new respect. Mike Thompson started asking her to demonstrate some of the techniques she had learned, and even Derek Collins admitted that she was becoming a formidable opponent despite her size. You're like a completely different person, Janet observed after a particularly successful training session. What changed? Sarah thought about the question as they walked to their next class. I stopped trying to be someone else and started figuring out how to be the best version of myself. The academy's curriculum was demanding, covering everything from criminal law and constitutional rights to emergency medical procedures and firearms training. Sarah excelled in the academic portions, often scoring among the highest in the class on written exams. Her attention to detail and analytical thinking skills impressed even the most skeptical instructors. Physical training remained challenging, but Sarah's improvement was undeniable. She was never going to be the fastest runner or the strongest recruit, but she was becoming one of the most technically proficient. Her defensive tactics instructor, Officer Patricia Gonzalez, pulled her aside after class one day. I've been watching your progress, Martinez, Gonzalez said. You've got something special. Most recruits try to overpower their opponents, but you think strategically. That's going to serve you well on the streets. The praise meant more to Sarah than any compliment she had ever received. Gonzalez was a veteran officer with 20 years of experience, and her opinion carried weight throughout the academy. As the weeks passed, Sarah found herself looking forward to each day's challenges rather than dreading them. She had discovered reserves of strength and determination she never knew she possessed. The scared young woman who had walked into the academy on that first day was slowly being replaced by someone stronger and more confident. Rodriguez continued to be demanding, but Sarah began to understand that his harsh methods were designed to prepare them for life-threatening situations where hesitation or weakness could be fatal. She stopped taking his criticism personally and started viewing it as valuable feedback from someone who wanted her to succeed. The transformation wasn't lost on Rodriguez. During a defensive tactics demonstration, he chose Sarah to help demonstrate a complex takedown technique to the rest of the class. As they faced off on the mat, Sarah felt none of the fear and anxiety that had plagued her during her first weeks at the academy. Remember, Rodriguez told the class as they prepared to begin, real fights don't follow rules. Your opponent might be bigger, stronger, or armed. You have to use every advantage you can find. The demonstration began, and Rodriguez came at Sarah with controlled aggression. She ducked under his initial grab attempt and used his momentum to throw him off balance. Before he could recover, she applied a joint lock that forced him to submit or risk injury. The gymnasium fell silent as Rodriguez tapped out, signaling his submission. Sarah released the hold immediately and helped him to his feet. For a moment, They looked at each other with mutual respect. That, Rodriguez said to the class, is how you turn a size disadvantage into an advantage. Martinez used my own strength against me. She didn't try to match my power, she redirected it. The applause from her fellow recruits was the sweetest sound Sarah had ever heard. She had proven to herself and everyone else that she belonged at the academy. But more importantly, she had learned that true strength came from within, not from the size of your muscles or the volume of your voice. As the training session ended and the recruits filed out of the gymnasium, Rodriguez caught Sarah's arm. "Good work today, Martinez," he said quietly. "But don't let it go to your head. Tomorrow's another day, and there are still plenty of challenges ahead." Sarah nodded, understanding that Rodriguez's high standards would never change. But she was no longer intimidated by that prospect. She had found her place at the academy and discovered abilities she never knew she possessed. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she was ready to face them head-on. The academy had taught her that being a police officer wasn't just about physical strength or intimidation tactics. It was about intelligence, determination, and the courage to stand up for what was right even when the odds were stacked against you. Those were qualities that couldn't be measured in height or weight, and Sarah possessed them in abundance. As she walked home that evening, Sarah felt a sense of pride and accomplishment that she had never experienced before. She was still the same small woman who had walked into the academy months ago, but everything else had changed. She had discovered her own strength and learned to believe in herself. The journey was far from over, but she was no longer afraid of what lay ahead. The midterm evaluations at the police academy were scheduled for the 8th week of training. Sarah had been dreading this day for weeks because it would determine whether she could continue in the program or would be sent home. The evaluations covered every aspect of their training: physical fitness, defensive tactics, firearms proficiency, driving skills, and written examinations on law and procedures. Rodriguez had been particularly intense during the weeks leading up to the evaluations. He pushed the recruits harder than ever, constantly reminding them that this was their chance to prove they deserved to wear a badge. For Sarah, the pressure felt overwhelming. Despite her improvements, she still struggled with some of the physical requirements. The evaluation began at dawn with a timed obstacle course that tested agility, strength, and endurance. Sarah watched nervously as her classmates completed the course one by one. Mike Thompson finished with an impressive time that earned approving nods from the instructors. Derek Collins powered through the obstacles with brute force, making it look easy. When Sarah's name was called, she felt her heart racing. The course consisted of 8 challenging obstacles: a 6-foot wall to climb, a series of hurdles to jump, a crawling section under low barriers, a rope climb, a tire run, balance beams, and finally a sprint to the finish line. "Martinez, you have 5 minutes and 30 seconds to complete the course," announced Officer Jenkins, the evaluation supervisor. "That's the minimum time required for graduation. If you go over, you fail this portion of the exam." Sarah took her position at the starting line and tried to calm her breathing. She had practiced this course dozens of times, but never under the pressure of a formal evaluation. Rodriguez stood off to the side, his arms crossed, and his face expressionless. "Begin," Jenkins shouted. Sarah exploded from the starting line, her months of training evident in her improved speed and form. She reached the first obstacle, the 6-foot wall, and used the rope climbing technique she had perfected to pull herself over quickly. The hurdles came next, and she cleared them with smooth, efficient movements. The crawling section had always been one of her strengths because her smaller size allowed her to move faster through the low tunnels. She emerged from the last tunnel and sprinted toward the rope climb, the obstacle that had given her the most trouble early in training. Looking up at the 20-foot rope, Sarah took a deep breath and began to climb. Her technique was perfect now, using her legs to grip the rope while her arms pulled her upward. She reached the top, rang the bell, and descended quickly. The tire run required careful footwork to avoid tripping, and Sarah navigated it with the precision she had developed through countless hours of practice. The balance beams tested her coordination, and she crossed them without a single wobble. The final sprint stretched before her, and Sarah could hear her classmates cheering from the sidelines. She pushed herself harder than she ever had before, her legs burning as she raced toward the finish line. 4 minutes and 58 seconds, Jenkins announced as Sarah crossed the finish line. She had done it. Not only had she passed the obstacle course, but she had finished with 32 seconds to spare. The relief was overwhelming, and she bent over with her hands on her knees, trying to catch her breath. "Not bad," Rodriguez said as he approached. It was the closest thing to praise she had ever heard from him. The firearms evaluation came next, and Sarah felt more confident about this portion. She had always been a good shot, and the Academy's training had only improved her accuracy. The test required her to hit targets at various distances using both her service pistol and a shotgun. As she stepped up to the firing line, Sarah focused on her breathing and stance. The months of training had taught her to block out distractions and concentrate solely on her targets. She fired her first series of shots and was pleased to see tight groupings in the center of the target. The shotgun portion was more challenging because of the weapon's recoil, but Sarah had learned to brace herself properly and maintain control. When the smoke cleared, her targets showed the kind of accuracy that impressed even the most demanding instructors. "Excellent work," Martinez said Instructor Williams, the Academy's firearms expert. "You scored in the top 10% of your class." The defensive tactics evaluation was what Sarah had been both anticipating and dreading. This would be her chance to demonstrate how much she had improved, but it also meant facing off against some of the Academy's most skilled instructors in simulated combat situations. Rodriguez himself would be conducting her evaluation, which added extra pressure to an already stressful situation. They faced each other on the practice mats as the other instructors and recruits gathered around to watch. "This evaluation will consist of 3 scenarios," Rodriguez announced. "Scenario 1, suspect attempts to flee, and you must take them down safely. Scenario 2, suspect becomes aggressive and attempts to strike you. Scenario 3, suspect attempts to take your weapon." Sarah nodded, trying to keep her nerves under control. She had practiced all of these scenarios countless times, but doing them under evaluation conditions felt completely different. "Scenario 1 begins now," Rodriguez said, and immediately started to turn and run. Sarah reacted instinctively, using the pursuit techniques she had learned to close the distance quickly. When she was close enough, she executed a perfect takedown that brought Rodriguez to the ground safely, but effectively. She quickly moved to secure his hands behind his back using the restraint holds they had been taught. "Good," Rodriguez said as he got to his feet. Scenario 2. This time, Rodriguez came at her with controlled aggression, throwing punches that she had to deflect or avoid. Sarah used her smaller size to her advantage, staying mobile and looking for opportunities to counterattack. When Rodriguez threw a right cross, she ducked under it and executed a takedown that used his own momentum against him. "Excellent technique," commented Instructor Gonzalez from the sidelines. "She's using leverage instead of trying to match his strength." The final scenario was the most dangerous. Rodriguez would attempt to grab her weapon, and Sarah would have to defend herself while maintaining control of her firearm. This was a situation that could mean life or death on the streets. Rodriguez moved quickly, grabbing for a practice weapon with both hands. Sarah had drilled this scenario so many times that her response was automatic. She stepped back and to the side while maintaining her grip on the weapon, then used a defensive strike to break Rodriguez's hold. The simulation escalated as Rodriguez continued to press his attack. Sarah found herself in a struggle for control of the weapon, exactly the kind of situation that had terrified her during her first weeks at the Academy. But now, instead of panic, she felt focused and determined. Using a combination of strikes and leverage techniques, Sarah managed to break free from Rodriguez's grasp and create distance between them. She quickly regained control of her weapon and assumed a defensive stance that would allow her to respond to any further attacks. "Time," Rodriguez called, ending the evaluation. Sarah stood there breathing heavily, hardly believing that she had successfully completed all 3 scenarios. The instructors spoke quietly among themselves, making notes on their evaluation forms. Martinez, Rodriguez said, loud enough for everyone to hear. 6 months ago, you walked into this academy looking like you belonged in a high school, not a police department. Today, you demonstrated the skills and mindset of a professional law enforcement officer. The compliment was so unexpected that Sarah almost didn't believe she had heard it correctly. Rodriguez, the man who had criticized and challenged her relentlessly, was actually praising her performance. However, Rodriguez continued, and Sarah's stomach dropped. Passing the midterm evaluation is just the beginning. The second half of this program will be even more challenging than the first. Don't let today's success make you overconfident. Sarah nodded, understanding that Rodriguez would never change completely. He would always be demanding and tough, but she now realized that was exactly what she needed to become the best officer she could be. The written examinations were the final component of the midterm evaluations. Sarah had always excelled academically, and the months of studying had prepared her well for the complex questions about criminal law, constitutional rights, and police procedures. As she worked through the exam questions, Sarah reflected on how much she had learned during her time at the academy. It wasn't just about the technical skills and knowledge, though those were important. The academy had taught her about herself, about finding strength she never knew she possessed, and pushing through obstacles that had once seemed impossible. When the results were posted the following Monday, Sarah scanned the list, nervously looking for her name. There it was in the group of recruits who had passed all portions of the evaluation and would continue in the program. But more than that, her overall score ranked her in the top 15% of her class. "Congratulations," Mike said, clapping her on the shoulder. "You earned this." Janet nodded in agreement. "I knew you had it in you from the beginning. You just needed to believe in yourself." The celebration was short-lived, however, as Rodriguez quickly reminded them that the second half of the program would focus on practical applications of everything they had learned. They would be doing ride-alongs with experienced officers, participating in realistic scenario training, and learning advanced tactical procedures. "The academy has been preparation," Rodriguez told them during their first class after the evaluations. "Now we're going to start training you for the real world. On the streets, there are no do-overs. There are no second chances. The decisions you make will affect real people's lives, including your own." The advanced training began with scenario-based exercises that put the recruits in realistic situations they might face as police officers. Sarah found herself responding to domestic violence calls, conducting traffic stops, and investigating crimes. Each scenario was designed to test not just their technical skills, but their judgment and decision-making abilities. During one particularly challenging exercise, Sarah was placed in a scenario where she had to respond to a report of a domestic disturbance. The actors playing the roles of husband and wife were skilled at creating realistic tension and emotion. When Sarah arrived at the scene, she found herself dealing with a volatile situation where both parties were angry and uncooperative. The husband was a large, intimidating man who immediately began challenging Sarah's authority. "They sent a little girl to handle this?" he sneered. "Where's the real cop?" Sarah felt a familiar flash of irritation at the comment about her size, but her months of training had taught her to stay professional and focused on the task at hand. She positioned herself strategically, keeping both parties in sight while maintaining a safe distance. "Sir, I need you to calm down so we can discuss what happened here," she said in a firm but non-threatening voice. "I don't have to listen to anything you say," the man replied, taking a step closer to Sarah. "You're just a kid playing dress-up." The situation was escalating, and Sarah could feel the tension in the room rising. This was exactly the kind of scenario where her size and appearance could work against her if she didn't handle it correctly. "Sir, I understand you're upset, but I need you to step back and lower your voice," Sarah said, using the de-escalation technique she had learned. "I'm here to help resolve this situation, but I can only do that if you cooperate with me." The man continued to advance, and Sarah realized she might have to use physical force to control the situation. But instead of feeling the panic that would have overwhelmed her months ago, she felt calm and prepared. Her training had given her the tools and confidence to handle whatever happened next. When the exercise ended, the instructor praised Sarah's professional demeanor and effective de-escalation techniques. "You maintained control of the situation without escalating the violence," he said. "That's exactly what we want to see from our officers." The ride-along portion of the training was particularly valuable because it gave the recruits a chance to see real police work in action. Sarah was paired with Officer Maria Santos, a 10-year veteran who worked in one of the city's busiest precincts. "The academy teaches you the basics," Santos explained as they began their first patrol together. "But every situation on the street is different. You have to learn to adapt and think on your feet." During their first week together, Sarah observed Santos handle everything from routine traffic stops to serious criminal investigations. She watched how the experienced officer used her training while also relying on intuition and experience to make split-second decisions. "You remind me of myself when I was starting out," Santos told Sarah one day. "Small but tough. The key is to never let anyone make you feel like you don't belong. You earned your spot here, just like everyone else." One evening during their patrol, they responded to a call about a burglary in progress. When they arrived at the scene, they found a broken window and signs that someone had entered the building illegally. Santos and Sarah approached the building carefully, using the tactical procedures they had learned at the academy. As they searched the building room by room, Sarah felt her adrenaline pumping. This was real police work, not a training exercise. If there was actually a burglar in the building, the situation could become dangerous very quickly. They found the suspect in the back room, stuffing items into a bag. He was a young man, probably in his early 20s, who looked more scared than dangerous. When he saw the officers, he dropped the bag and raised his hands. "Don't move," Santos commanded, drawing her weapon. "Keep your hands where I can see them." Sarah followed Santos's lead, positioning herself to cover the suspect while her training partner secured the scene. Everything happened exactly as they had practiced at the academy, but the reality of dealing with a real criminal made every movement feel more significant. The arrest went smoothly, and as they transported the suspect to the station, Santos complimented Sarah on her performance. "You stayed calm and followed procedure perfectly," she said. "That's exactly what you need to do in the field." Back at the academy, Sarah shared her ride-along experiences with her classmates. Each recruit was paired with different officers and exposed to different aspects of police work. The stories they shared helped everyone understand the variety of situations they might face as officers. Rodriguez continued to push them all hard during the advanced training phases. He seemed particularly focused on making sure they understood the weight of the responsibility they would soon carry. "In a few weeks, you'll graduate from this academy," he told them during one of their final classes. "You'll take an oath to serve and protect your community. That oath isn't just words. It's a sacred promise that you'll put other people's safety before your own comfort, your own convenience, and sometimes even your own life." Sarah listened intently, thinking about her uncle who had died in the line of duty. She understood better now what had driven him to choose this profession and what had ultimately cost him his life. The badge wasn't just a piece of metal. It was a symbol of commitment to something bigger than yourself. The final weeks of the academy included advanced firearms training, emergency driving courses, and intensive scenario-based exercises that tested everything they had learned. Sarah found herself consistently performing at the top of her class, earning recognition from instructors who had once doubted her abilities. Rodriguez pulled her aside after a particularly challenging training session. "Martinez, I owe you an apology," he said, surprising her with his serious tone. "An apology, sir? When you first walked into this academy, I didn't think you belonged here. I thought you were too small, too soft, too naive to be a cop. I was wrong." Sarah felt a mixture of emotions, gratitude for the acknowledgement, but also a lingering resentment over the months of harsh treatment. I put you through hell because I wanted to see if you would quit or if you would fight, Rodriguez continued. You fought. More than that, you got better every single day. That tells me you have what it takes to be an exceptional police officer. Thank you, sir. That means a lot coming from you. Don't thank me yet, Rodriguez said with a slight smile. The real test comes after graduation when you're out there on your own. But I have confidence that you'll represent this academy well. As graduation approached, Sarah reflected on her journey through the academy. She had entered as an uncertain young woman who doubted her own abilities. She was leaving as a confident, skilled professional who had proven herself capable of handling whatever challenges lay ahead. The transformation hadn't been easy. There had been moments when she wanted to quit, when the criticism and challenges seemed overwhelming. But each obstacle had made her stronger. Each setback had taught her something valuable about herself and about the profession she was entering. Her fellow recruits had also changed during their time at the academy. The group of strangers who had met on that first day had become a tight-knit team who supported and challenged each other. They had shared the stress, the victories, and the defeats that came with pursuing such a demanding career. As Sarah prepared for her final evaluation, she felt ready for whatever lay ahead. The academy had given her more than just technical skills and knowledge. It had given her confidence, resilience, and a clear understanding of what it meant to be a professional law enforcement officer. The journey was far from over, but Sarah knew she was prepared for the next phase of her career. She had proven to herself and everyone else that determination and heart could overcome any physical disadvantage. Whatever challenges awaited her on the streets, she would face them with the skills, knowledge, and confidence she had earned through months of grueling training. Graduation day arrived with the kind of crisp autumn morning that made everything feel possible. Sarah stood in front of her mirror, adjusting her dress uniform for what felt like the 100th time. The navy blue fabric was pristine, the brass buttons polished to a mirror shine, and the academy patch on her shoulder represented 6 months of the hardest work she had ever done. Her parents had driven down from their small hometown to attend the ceremony. Her mother had tears in her eyes when she saw Sarah in uniform for the first time, and her father's chest swelled with pride. They understood the significance of this moment in a way that few people could. "Your uncle would be so proud," her mother whispered as she adjusted Sarah's collar. "He always knew you had the heart of a warrior." The graduation ceremony was held in the academy's main auditorium, with families, friends, and police department officials filling every seat. Sarah sat with her 38 classmates who had successfully completed the program. 5 recruits had dropped out or been dismissed during the 6 months, unable to handle the physical and mental demands of the training. Rodriguez stood at the podium, looking proud and formal in his dress uniform. He had been transformed from their relentless taskmaster into someone who seemed genuinely moved by the occasion. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of his 15 years of experience in shaping future police officers. "Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, and proud families," Rodriguez began, "today we celebrate not just the graduation of 39 new police officers, but the completion of a transformation that began 6 months ago." Sarah listened as Rodriguez spoke about the challenges they had overcome, the skills they had developed, and the responsibility they were about to accept. She thought about her journey from that first terrifying day when she felt completely out of place to this moment when she felt confident and prepared for whatever lay ahead. These men and women have proven themselves through rigorous training and evaluation, Rodriguez continued. They have demonstrated not just physical capability and technical knowledge, but the character and judgment necessary to serve their communities with honor. When the time came to call individual graduates to receive their certificates, Sarah felt her heart racing. One by one, her classmates walked across the stage to shake hands with the police chief and receive their graduation credentials. "Officer Sarah Martinez," Rodriguez announced when her turn came. Sarah walked across the stage with her head held high, feeling the eyes of everyone in the auditorium following her movement. When she reached the police chief, he smiled warmly and extended his hand. "Congratulations, Officer Martinez," Chief Williams said as he handed her the certificate. "I've heard excellent things about your performance at the academy. The department is lucky to have you." "Thank you, sir. I won't let you down." As she walked back to her seat, Sarah caught Rodriguez's eye. He gave her a slight nod, and she could see something that looked like respect in his expression. The man who had once questioned whether she belonged at the academy was now watching her graduate with what appeared to be genuine pride. After the formal ceremony ended, families and graduates mingled in the academy courtyard for refreshments and photographs. Sarah was surrounded by her parents and her academy classmates, everyone talking excitedly about their upcoming assignments and the next phase of their careers. Mike Thompson approached with his parents in tow. "Sarah, I want you to meet my mom and dad," he said. "I've told them all about how you became the toughest person in our class." Mike's parents were warm and congratulatory, expressing genuine admiration for Sarah's accomplishments. It meant a lot to hear that Mike had spoken positively about her to his family, especially considering how much larger and physically stronger he was. Janet Wilson joined the group with her husband and 2 young children. "Sarah, these are my kids I've been telling you about," she said. "Tommy and Lisa, this is Officer Martinez. The one I told you is going to be a hero." The children looked up at Sarah with wide eyes, clearly impressed by her uniform and badge. Sarah knelt down to their level and spoke with them about police work, using simple terms they could understand. Their innocent questions reminded her why she had wanted to become a police officer in the first place. As the afternoon wore on, Sarah found herself in a quiet conversation with Rodriguez near the Academy's memorial wall, which honored officers who had died in the line of duty. Her uncle's name was engraved on that wall, and she often visited it during her training to remember why her work mattered. "Your uncle was a good cop," Rodriguez said, following her gaze to the memorial. "I worked with him a few times early in my career. He had the same determination you've shown here." "He's the reason I wanted to become a police officer," Sarah admitted. "I want to continue what he started." "You will," Rodriguez said with certainty. "But you'll do it your own way, using your own strengths. Don't try to be someone else. Be the best version of yourself." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, looking at the names of fallen officers who had made the ultimate sacrifice for their communities. Sarah felt the weight of the responsibility she was accepting, but she also felt ready to carry it. "Rodriguez," Sarah said, using his name without the formal title for the first time, "I want to thank you for pushing me so hard. I know I didn't appreciate it at the time, but I understand now that you were preparing me for realities I couldn't have imagined when I started." Rodriguez nodded. "The streets don't care if you're ready or not. They don't care if your feelings get hurt or if you're having a bad day. I needed to know that you could handle pressure and keep performing when everything goes wrong. You've proven that you can." As the graduation celebration began to wind down, Sarah exchanged contact information with her classmates and promised to stay in touch. They would be scattered across different precincts and assignments, but the bonds they had formed during their academy training would last throughout their careers. Her parents drove her to her new apartment near her assigned precinct, where she would begin her probationary period as a patrol officer. The building was modest but clean, and Sarah felt excited about starting this new chapter of her life. "Are you nervous about starting tomorrow?" her mother asked as they unloaded Sarah's belongings. "A little," Sarah admitted, "but it's a good kind of nervous. I feel prepared for whatever comes next." That evening, Sarah laid out her patrol uniform for her first day of duty. The black tactical pants, protective vest, and duty belt loaded with equipment looked professional and serious. She thought about all the training that had prepared her to use each piece of equipment responsibly and effectively. Her first assignment was to the 4th Precinct, one of the city's busiest areas with a diverse mix of residential neighborhoods, commercial districts, and industrial zones. She would be partnered with Officer Tom Bradley, a 15-year veteran who had volunteered to work with new recruits. Sarah arrived at the precinct 30 minutes early, wanting to make a good first impression. The building buzzed with activity as officers came and went, handling the constant flow of calls and paperwork that kept a police department running 24 hours a day. "You must be Martinez," said a tall, thin man with graying hair and kind eyes. "I'm Tom Bradley, your new partner. Welcome to the Fourth." Bradley led her through the precinct, introducing her to dispatchers, detectives, and other patrol officers. Everyone was welcoming and professional, though Sarah could see some of them sizing her up, probably wondering how someone her size would handle the demands of patrol work. "Don't worry about what anyone thinks," Bradley said quietly as they walked to their patrol car. "Your reputation from the academy preceded you. Rodriguez called me personally to say you were one of the best recruits he'd ever trained." Sarah felt a surge of pride and surprise. Rodriguez had not only spoken to her new supervisor about her performance, but he had apparently given her a strong recommendation. It was completely unexpected, but it meant more to her than any graduation award could have. Their first call came within minutes of starting their shift. A domestic disturbance in a low-income housing complex required immediate response. Sarah felt her adrenaline spike as Bradley activated the emergency lights, and they raced through traffic toward the scene. "Domestics are always unpredictable," Bradley explained as they approached the apartment building. "People are emotional, sometimes intoxicated, and the situation can change quickly. Stay alert and follow my lead until you get more experience." They climbed 3 flights of stairs to the apartment where neighbors had reported yelling and sounds of violence. Sarah could hear angry voices through the thin door, and her training kicked in automatically. She positioned herself to the side of the door while Bradley knocked and announced their presence. "Police, open the door." The voices inside stopped abruptly, followed by the sound of footsteps and whispered conversation. After a long moment, the door opened to reveal a young woman with tear-stained cheeks and a red mark on her face. "Are you all right, miss?" Bradley asked gently. The woman nodded, but didn't speak. Behind her, a man appeared, looking angry and defiant. He was tall and muscular, with the kind of aggressive posture that suggested he was used to intimidating people. "What do you want?" the man demanded. "This is none of your business." "We received a report of a disturbance," Bradley explained calmly. "We need to make sure everyone is safe." Sarah watched the interaction carefully, noting the woman's body language and the man's aggressive demeanor. Her academy training had prepared her for exactly this type of situation, but experiencing it in real life felt more intense and unpredictable. "Everything's fine," the man insisted. "You can leave now." But Bradley was experienced enough to recognize the signs of domestic violence, and Sarah could see that he wasn't satisfied with the man's explanation. The woman's silence and obvious distress told a different story than the man's aggressive denials. "Sir, I need you to step outside so we can speak with you," Bradley said in a tone that made it clear this wasn't a request. The man's attitude immediately became more hostile. "I don't have to go anywhere. This is my apartment, and I want you to leave." Sarah felt the tension in the situation escalating. This was the moment when her size and appearance could work against her if she didn't handle it properly. The man was clearly the type who might not respect authority from someone he perceived as weak or inexperienced. "Sir," Sarah said, stepping forward slightly, "we understand this is your home, but we have a responsibility to make sure everyone here is safe. If you cooperate with us, we can resolve this quickly and with minimal disruption." The man turned his attention to Sarah, looking her up and down with obvious disdain. "Are you kidding me? They sent a little girl to handle this? Where's the real cop?" Sarah felt a flash of irritation at the familiar comment about her size, but her months of training had taught her to stay professional and focused. She had heard variations of this insult countless times during the academy, and she had learned to use it to her advantage. "I'm a real cop, sir," she said calmly, "and I need you to step outside so we can talk." The man laughed mockingly. "What are you going to do if I don't? Arrest me?" The challenge in his voice was unmistakable. This was exactly the kind of test that Rodriguez had prepared her for during all those grueling months at the academy. Sarah felt calm and ready for whatever happened next. "If necessary, yes," she replied simply. Something in her tone must have conveyed her seriousness, because the man's expression changed slightly. He was clearly expecting her to back down or call for backup, but Sarah stood her ground with the quiet confidence that came from months of intensive training. Bradley watched the interaction carefully, ready to intervene if necessary, but giving Sarah the chance to handle the situation herself. This was part of her training as a new officer, learning to take the lead while having experienced backup available. "You think you can make me do anything?" the man said, taking a step towards Sarah. "You're half my size." Sarah didn't retreat or show any sign of intimidation. Her academy training had taught her that backing down in this situation would only escalate the conflict and potentially put everyone in danger. "Sir, your size doesn't change the fact that you need to comply with our lawful orders," she said firmly. "I'm asking you nicely to step outside. Don't make this more difficult than it needs to be." The man's face flushed with anger at being challenged by someone he clearly viewed as inferior. "I don't take orders from little girls playing cop," he snarled, moving closer to Sarah. This was the moment Sarah had been preparing for since her first day at the academy. All the training, all the criticism, all the challenges had led to this confrontation where she would have to prove that her badge and uniform represented real authority regardless of her size. "Sir, you're interfering with a police investigation," Sarah said, her voice steady and professional. "You can either step outside voluntarily, or you can be arrested for obstruction. The choice is yours." The man hesitated, clearly surprised by Sarah's unwavering resolve. He had expected her to be intimidated by his size and aggressive posture, but instead she was giving him clear choices and consequences with the calm professionalism of an experienced officer. Bradley stepped forward slightly, his presence serving as a reminder that Sarah wasn't alone. But he continued to let her take the lead, recognizing that this was an important moment in her development as a police officer. The standoff continued for several tense seconds. Sarah could feel her heart racing, but her training kept her focused and calm. She had faced similar challenges during academy scenarios, but this was real life with real consequences. Finally, the man seemed to realize that Sarah wasn't going to back down. With obvious reluctance, he stepped outside the apartment and allowed Bradley to escort him down the hallway for questioning. Sarah stayed with the woman, who immediately began crying and explaining what had happened. As Sarah listened to the story of ongoing abuse and intimidation, she felt a deep sense of purpose. This was exactly why she had wanted to become a police officer, to help people who couldn't help themselves. The situation was resolved without violence, but it required Sarah to use every skill she had learned during her academy training. The domestic violence case resulted in an arrest, and the victim was connected with resources to help her escape the abusive relationship. As they returned to their patrol car, Bradley complimented Sarah on her handling of the situation. "That was textbook police work," he said. "You stayed calm, followed procedure, and didn't let him intimidate you. Rodriguez was right about you." Sarah felt a surge of satisfaction and confidence. Her first real test as a police officer had gone exactly as her training had prepared her for. She had proven to herself and to her partner that she could handle difficult situations with professionalism and authority. The rest of their shift included traffic stops, a minor theft investigation, and several routine calls that gave Sarah additional experience in dealing with the public. Each interaction reinforced the lessons she had learned at the academy and built her confidence as a patrol officer. As they returned to the precinct at the end of their shift, Sarah reflected on her first day as a police officer. It had been everything she had hoped for and more challenging than she had expected. But she felt absolutely certain that she had chosen the right career and that she was prepared for whatever challenges lay ahead. Bradley filled out her evaluation form for the day, rating her performance as excellent in all categories. "You're going to be a great cop, Martinez," he said as they finished their paperwork. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." That night, Sarah called her parents to tell them about her first day on the job. She also sent a text message to Rodriguez, thanking him for his recommendation and letting him know that her first shift had gone well. His response came quickly. "Knew you'd do great. Stay safe out there." As Sarah prepared for bed, she thought about the journey that had brought her to this point. 6 months ago, she had been an uncertain recruit who doubted her own abilities. Tonight, she was a confident police officer who had successfully handled her first real test in the field. The academy had been just the beginning. Now the real work started, and Sarah felt ready for whatever challenges awaited her on streets. She had proven that determination and proper training could overcome any disadvantage, and she was eager to continue proving herself every day. 3 months into her probationary period as a patrol officer, Sarah had established herself as one of the most reliable and professional officers in the 4th Precinct. Her arrest record was solid. Her reports were thorough and well-written, and she had earned the respect of both her colleagues and the community members she served. Officer Bradley continued to be impressed with her performance and had written several commendations highlighting her professional growth and natural police instincts. Sarah had successfully handled everything from routine traffic enforcement to serious criminal investigations, always maintaining the calm professionalism that had become her trademark. The precinct's annual training day was scheduled for a Tuesday in late spring. All patrol officers were required to participate in refresher courses covering defensive tactics, firearms qualifications, and emergency response procedures. Sarah looked forward to these training sessions because they reminded her of her academy days and gave her opportunities to continue improving her skills. What Sarah didn't know was that Sergeant Rodriguez had been invited to conduct the defensive tactics portion of the training. The 4th Precinct's captain had specifically requested Rodriguez because of his reputation for providing realistic and challenging scenarios that prepared officers for real-world situations. Sarah arrived at the training facility early, as was her habit, and was surprised to see Rodriguez setting up equipment in the gymnasium. Their eyes met across the room, and he walked over to greet her. "Officer Martinez," he said with a slight smile. "I should have known you'd be the first one here. How's patrol life treating you?" "Very well, sir. I'm learning something new every day." "That's what I like to hear. I've been getting excellent reports about your performance from Bradley and your captain. Seems like that academy training stuck." Before Sarah could respond, other officers began filtering into the gymnasium. Many of them recognized Rodriguez from his reputation, and word quickly spread that the legendary academy instructor would be conducting their training. Captain Morrison gathered everyone together and introduced Rodriguez to those who didn't already know him. Sergeant Rodriguez has 15 years of experience training police recruits, and he's here today to make sure our defensive tactics skills are sharp and current. I expect everyone to give him the same attention and effort you would give any training instructor. Rodriguez stepped forward to address the group. Sarah noticed that he looked exactly the same as he had during her academy days, intense, professional, and completely focused on the task at hand. "Today we're going to work on realistic defensive scenarios," Rodriguez announced. "I'm not interested in fancy moves or choreographed demonstrations. We're going to practice the skills you need to survive on the streets when everything goes wrong." The training began with basic techniques and gradually progressed to more complex scenarios. Sarah found herself paired with different officers for various exercises, and she was pleased to discover that her academy training had prepared her well. The techniques that Rodriguez had drilled into her months ago came naturally, and she was able to execute them with confidence and precision. Rodriguez moved through the group, observing each officer's performance and offering corrections and suggestions. When he reached Sarah's station, he watched her demonstrate a defensive technique against a larger opponent. "Good form, Martinez," he said. "You're using leverage effectively. But let's see how you handle a more aggressive attacker." Rodriguez signaled for Sarah's training partner to increase the intensity of his attack. The exercise became more realistic and challenging, requiring Sarah to use everything she had learned about defending herself against larger, stronger opponents. As the morning progressed, Rodriguez introduced increasingly difficult scenarios. Officers were required to defend themselves while protecting evidence, while calling for backup, and while dealing with multiple attackers. Sarah excelled in each situation drawing on the mental toughness and technical skills that Rodriguez had helped her develop. During the lunch break, several officers approached Sarah to compliment her performance. They were impressed with her technique and professionalism, especially considering her relatively small stature and limited experience on the force. "You make it look easy," said Officer Jackson, a 10-year veteran who was known for his physical strength. "Where did you learn to fight like that?" "The police academy," Sarah replied simply. "Sergeant Rodriguez was my instructor." "That explains it," Jackson nodded. "I've heard he's tough, but effective." The afternoon session focused on scenario-based training that simulated real-world situations officers might encounter. Rodriguez had set up several stations where officers would face different challenges. A traffic stop that turned violent, a domestic dispute with an armed suspect, and an arrest situation where the suspect attempted to flee and then fight. Sarah rotated through each station, performing well in every scenario. Her academy training had prepared her for exactly these types of situations, and she felt confident and comfortable with each challenge. The final exercise of the day was designed to be the most challenging. Rodriguez explained that he would personally test each officer in a high-intensity scenario that combined multiple elements: physical confrontation, weapon retention, and tactical decision-making. "This exercise will push you to your limits," Rodriguez warned the group. "I'm going to attack each of you with the intensity and unpredictability you might face from a desperate criminal. You'll need to use everything you've learned to maintain control of the situation." One by one, officers faced off against Rodriguez in the center of the gymnasium while their colleagues watched and learned. Rodriguez was relentless but controlled, pushing each officer to demonstrate their maximum capabilities while ensuring no one was seriously injured. When Sarah's turn came, she felt a familiar mixture of nerves and excitement. This would be her first direct confrontation with Rodriguez since her academy graduation, and she wanted to show him how much she had grown as an officer. They faced each other in the center of the mat, surrounded by their colleagues who had formed a circle to watch. Rodriguez looked at Sarah with the same intense expression she remembered from their academy days. "Are you ready, Martinez?" he asked. "Yes, sir." The scenario began immediately. Rodriguez came at Sarah with controlled but aggressive movements, simulating an attack from a suspect who was desperate to avoid arrest. Sarah responded with the defensive techniques she had mastered, using her speed and technical skills to counter Rodriguez's attacks. The exercise escalated quickly. Rodriguez attempted to grab Sarah's weapon, forcing her to defend herself while maintaining control of her firearm. This was the same type of scenario that had given her so much trouble during her early academy training, but now she handled it with confidence and skill. Sarah used Rodriguez's own momentum against him, executing a perfect takedown that brought the larger man to the ground. She quickly transitioned to a control position, maintaining her grip on her weapon while securing Rodriguez's hands. But Rodriguez wasn't finished. He continued to resist, forcing Sarah to adapt her techniques and use multiple skills simultaneously. The exercise became a complex demonstration of everything she had learned about police defensive tactics. For several intense minutes, Sarah and Rodriguez engaged in what looked like a real fight to the watching officers. Sarah had to block strikes, prevent weapon grabs, execute takedowns, and apply control holds while maintaining her professional composure throughout the confrontation. Finally, Rodriguez signaled the end of the exercise. Sarah had successfully defended herself against every attack, maintained control of her weapon, and secured the suspect using appropriate force and technique. The gymnasium erupted in applause from Sarah's colleagues. They had just witnessed a demonstration of police skills that was both technically excellent and professionally executed. Sarah had proven that her small size was no disadvantage when combined with proper training and technique. Rodriguez got to his feet and faced Sarah, his expression serious but respectful. For a moment, neither of them spoke as the reality of what had just happened sank in. "Outstanding performance, Officer Martinez," Rodriguez said loud enough for everyone to hear. That was a textbook example of how proper training and determination can overcome any physical disadvantage. Sarah felt a surge of pride and satisfaction that went beyond anything she had experienced since graduation. Rodriguez, the man who had once questioned whether she belonged in law enforcement, had just publicly praised her performance in front of her colleagues. But Rodriguez wasn't finished. He turned to address the entire group of officers. "I want everyone here to understand what you just witnessed," he said. 6 months ago, this officer was a recruit who struggled with the physical demands of academy training. Many people, including myself, questioned whether she had what it takes to be a police officer. Sarah felt her cheeks burning with embarrassment as Rodriguez continued his speech. She hadn't expected him to share details about her academy struggles with her new colleagues. But Officer Martinez proved something important during her academy training, and again here today, Rodriguez continued. She proved that success in law enforcement isn't about size or strength. It's about courage, determination, and the willingness to never give up when things get difficult. The gymnasium was completely silent as Rodriguez's words sank in. Sarah realized that instead of embarrassing her, he was using her story as an example for the other officers. Every officer in this room will face situations where they're outmatched, outnumbered, or overwhelmed, Rodriguez said. When that happens, you'll need to dig deep and find reserves of strength and skill you didn't know you possessed. Officer Martinez has shown all of us what that looks like. Rodriguez turned back to Sarah, his expression now showing something that looked like genuine respect and perhaps even admiration. "Officer Martinez," he said, "you've exceeded every expectation I had for your career. You've become exactly the kind of police officer this community needs." The applause that followed was longer and more enthusiastic than before. Sarah's colleagues clearly understood the significance of what Rodriguez had said. His praise meant something because it came from someone known for his demanding standards and reluctance to give compliments. As the training session concluded and officers began to disperse, several of Sarah's colleagues approached her to offer congratulations and ask questions about her academy experience. The story of her transformation from struggling recruit to accomplished officer had clearly inspired many of them. Captain Morrison pulled Sarah aside as the gymnasium emptied. "Officer Martinez, that was an impressive display of professional skills. Sergeant Rodriguez spoke very highly of your performance today." "Thank you, sir." Sergeant Rodriguez was an excellent instructor at the academy. "He also told me something interesting," the captain continued. "He said you're exactly the kind of officer he hopes to train, but rarely gets the chance to see develop. That's high praise from someone with his reputation." Later that evening, as Sarah was finishing her shift paperwork, Bradley approached her desk with a broad smile. "I heard about what happened at training today," he said. "Word travels fast around here, and everyone's talking about how you handled yourself against Rodriguez." "It was just training," Sarah replied modestly. "No, it was more than that," Bradley insisted. "You proved something important today, not just to Rodriguez, but to everyone who watched. You showed that heart and determination matter more than size and strength." As Sarah drove home that night, she reflected on the events of the day. The confrontation with Rodriguez had been the ultimate test of everything she had learned during her academy training and her first months as a patrol officer. More importantly, the public recognition from Rodriguez had solidified her reputation among her colleagues. She was no longer the new officer who needed to prove herself. She was a respected professional who had demonstrated her capabilities under pressure. The next morning, Sarah arrived at the precinct to find a formal commendation letter waiting on her desk. It was from Rodriguez, recommending her for recognition based on her performance during the training exercise. The letter described her as an exceptional officer who represents the highest standards of professional law enforcement. Captain Morrison called Sarah into his office later that morning. "Officer Martinez, based on yesterday's training performance and the recommendation from Sergeant Rodriguez, I'm recommending you for early completion of your probationary period." Sarah was stunned. The probationary period typically lasted 12 months, but exceptional performance could sometimes lead to early completion after 9 months. "Sir, I'm honored by the recommendation, but I still have 3 months left in my probationary period. And you've already demonstrated the skills and professionalism we expect from our veteran officers, Morrison replied. Rodriguez's evaluation was particularly influential. He said you're ready for full officer status and additional responsibilities. The formal completion of her probationary period came 6 weeks later in a brief ceremony at the precinct. Sarah's parents attended, along with several of her academy classmates who had traveled from other precincts to show their support. Rodriguez was also there, having been invited by Captain Morrison to participate in the ceremony. When Sarah was officially sworn in as a full police officer, Rodriguez was the first person to shake her hand. "Congratulations, Officer Martinez," he said. "You've earned this through your own hard work and dedication." "Thank you, Sergeant. I couldn't have done it without your training." Rodriguez smiled, a genuine expression that Sarah had rarely seen during their academy days. "You always had what it takes, Martinez. You just needed to believe in yourself." As the ceremony concluded, Sarah found herself surrounded by colleagues, family, and friends who had supported her journey from uncertain recruit to accomplished police officer. She thought about her uncle, whose name was engraved on the Academy memorial wall, and felt certain that he would be proud of what she had accomplished. 6 months later, Sarah received a phone call that would mark another milestone in her career. It was Rodriguez, calling to offer her an opportunity she had never expected. "Martinez, I have a proposition for you," he said. "The Academy is looking for experienced officers to serve as assistant instructors. I'd like to recommend you for the position." Sarah was speechless. The idea of returning to the Academy as an instructor had never occurred to her, but it represented an incredible opportunity to help shape the next generation of police officers. It would mean a promotion to detective rank and a significant increase in responsibility, Rodriguez continued. "But I think you'd be perfect for the job. You understand what it's like to overcome challenges and prove yourself. That's exactly what new recruits need to see." The offer represented a complete transformation of Sarah's relationship with Rodriguez. The man who had once questioned her ability to become a police officer was now recommending her for one of the most prestigious positions available to young officers. "I'm interested," Sarah said. "When would I start?" "Next month's academy class. You'll be working with me to train 40 new recruits. Think you can handle being back in that environment?" Sarah smiled, thinking about all the young people who would walk into the academy feeling uncertain and overwhelmed, just as she had. "I think I can handle it, Sergeant. In fact, I think I'll be very good at it." "I know you will be," Rodriguez replied. "Welcome back to the academy, Detective Martinez." As Sarah hung up the phone, she realized that her journey had come full circle. She was returning to the place where she had discovered her own strength and determination, but now she would be on the other side of the training process. She would be the one helping uncertain recruits find their own courage and capabilities. The transformation was complete. The small, uncertain young woman who had once struggled to meet Rodriguez's demanding standards was now his chosen successor, ready to carry on the tradition of training exceptional police officers. Sarah had not only proven herself worthy of wearing the badge, she had become an example for others to follow. Her story would inspire future generations of recruits who might walk into the academy feeling like they don't belong, only to discover that determination and heart can overcome any obstacle. The sergeant had indeed taken her down during those first challenging days at the academy. But Sarah had bounced back stronger than ever, and now she would help others do the same. Her greatest victory wasn't defeating Rodriguez in that training exercise. It was earning his respect and trust enough to be chosen as his successor. The legacy would continue, and Sarah Martinez would be the one carrying it forward.